Hello, welcome back to the Bio 122 lecture videos. This is video number 13, where we're going to talk about the diversity of animal digestive systems. And if we look at animals in general, we can break them into two general categories: those that have an incomplete digestive tract and those that have a complete digestive tract. If we start with the incomplete, another name for that is the gastrovascular cavity, because it only has really one opening and one compartment in which digestion is done. So food will enter through a mouth, but that same opening is technically also the anus, because the waste products will also have to exit. So it's much less efficient because it has very few specialized digestive organs associated with it. Compare that to, we're going to see the complete digestive tract, which is called the alimentary canal, which many animals, including humans and even simple things like earthworms, have two complete openings so that food enters through one opening, the mouth, and then there are specialized organs along the way that do very efficient processing to break the food particles down in the process of digestion and then absorption. And then only the waste has to exit through the anus. And so we can have a more continuous flow through this type of complete tract. But first, let's concentrate on the incomplete digestive tracts. And here's an example of the planarian, a flatworm, and we've seen this used as a few different examples. Planarian are triploplastic animals, so they have three tissue layers, but these are acoelomate animals, so they have no true body cavities. Instead, they have a mouth in the center of their body, despite the fact that this would appear to be where the head would be. There are some nervous system components and eye spots, so sensory receptors. This looks like it would be a head where we would expect a mouth, but there's no opening here. Instead, the mouth and this muscular pharynx, where they can reach food, just simply goes to a body or it's actually not a body cavity, it's just a digestive cavity, the gastrovascular cavity. And shown in blue on this part of the figure, we can see that the pharynx and the mouth are here, and this area is used for just diffusion of the food particles after they're digested. But notice every one of these ends up in a dead end. Everywhere you go, it will travel throughout the inside of the body, but there's no exit here. So as food is being digested and broken down, anything that can't be digested has to reverse course and then be ejected through the same opening it came in. This is going to greatly reduce the efficiency of the system, and it's why you're going to see it generally in very small organisms. Here's another blow up of the planera, showing this muscular pharynx and the mouth and the digestive tract here. It does have the properties that we see of increasing surface area by creating these variable surfaces that are called rugae, that makes a greater area for diffusion into the body. But the only way the things really come in are just the same mechanisms that a single cell organism would use, of endocytosis, bringing things in, breaking them down, and then bringing the nutrients into the apparatus that's going to produce new proteins and new metabolic machinery. Well, here's another example of an incomplete digestive tract in a hydra. So it has tentacles, but then the mouth, and this is a jellyfish, or this is actually probably a comb jelly, where again, the mouth and the gastrovascular cavity, but notice everything's a dead end. There's only one opening here. This is showing a hydra with a fly larvae, Daphnia, inside its gastrovascular cavity. And here, the digestion will take place because the cells that line the gastrovascular cavity will secrete enzymes. The digestive enzymes are actually secreted by these cells that will break the food particles down into simple molecules of amino acids, glucose, fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. And then the small molecules will get absorbed through just normal cellular ingestion processes. Just at this point, it's really working very similar to what a single cell organism does. Compare this to, here is a, I believe this is a leech, and this organism has a complete digestive tract, starting with the mouth, the pharynx, and then an intestine and an anus. So that means food can enter the mouth, and then the process of digestion will will happen in specific steps along the way. So there can be great specialization in the process. Here is a worm where the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, crop and gizzard, we'll talk about what those are in the next video, and the long intestine, which allows absorption through a very long part, and then anything that's not digested will simply continue on its way out of the body. So unlike a organism with an incomplete digestive tract, we don't have to stop consuming things in order to eject waste. So this is like an in and out. This is a continuous process moving food through the body. So this becomes a very efficient mechanism. Now, if we look at the family tree, so here's the phylogenetic chart of organisms that have incomplete digestive tracts. Well, the porifera, so the sponges, would all have gastrovascular cavities together with the cnidaria and the centiphoria, so the comb jellies and the jellyfish. And then this is the flatworm that we just saw. So these three groups here all have incomplete digestive tracts. And if we trace them down to where their branch line are, remember the sponge probably has the closest relationship with our ancestral protist. And that's one of the critical pieces of evidence because of the similarity between the cells in the sponge and the cells of the protist. And the development of tissues, the very first tissues being the cnidaria and the centiphoria, but not, these are dipoplastic organisms. And then we get the very first tripoplastic organisms, but these are branches away from the body cavities. And so one thing that's going to be true of all of these organisms that have a incomplete digestive tract, notice they also don't have a body cavity. So that's what they're lacking, because to have the really efficient alimentary canal, you need a place to put a circulatory system. You need a place to develop other organ systems. So in contrast, if we were to look at all of these organisms, well, let me get a different color. So all of these organisms, from the chordates, which would include us, of course, all the vertebrates, the mammals, the insects, lophrodites, academia, so the sea stars, annelids, mollusks, rotifers, all of these organisms in here all have complete digestive tracts. So what do they link to? They all have body cavities. They're either coelomate or pseudocoelomate. And of course, we have the difference in protostome and deuterostomes. And remember, the distinction there was we have two openings. We have a mouth and we have an anus. It's just which one develops first. So all of that seems to make sense evolutionarily. But let me bring your attention to one of these, the Lophrodites. So this group of organisms here, and notice that we actually have a big question mark there. We talked about these before because we're still having quite a bit of debate on exactly where they fit in to our phylogenetic tree. But let's look at what they are, and based on the morphology, they are separated specifically because of a feature of their digestive tract. And that feature is, and what the word Lophrorate means, is that these are the organisms that have cilia around their mouth, very similar to what a protist or a bacteria might have that they use for locomotion. But these cells use cilia to move food towards their mouth. And so we have a brain, so we have a sensory system and a motor control system that can regulate this. And then the mouth, so food comes in through the mouth, and then this is a U-shaped digestive tract showing that these organisms, and here's some pictures of them over here on the right. So certain mollusks would also fit this category, or mollusk-like organism. The gut processes and digests things here very much like a gastrovascular cavity, but the one addition is that now we have a separate opening for the anus. So food comes in, it's digested, and it passes out. Many look upon this as probably a evolutionary linkage between those organisms that have gastrovascular cavity and the development of the very first alimentary canal with the true separate opening, because it shares some properties of both. But then as these organisms grow from very early stage, the way that they grow is they add new segments onto the end. And so what happens is the mouth and the gut stays the same. And notice this portion of the body stays the same. But now we add more segments to make what is essentially the intestines longer and longer and longer, because the intestines is where most of the digestion takes place and the absorption into the body. And this is paired with an extension of the brain along each segment to control each of those segments. What's not shown here is that we'd also be adding a circulatory system to deliver the nutrients that are absorbed throughout the body. So this is probably an interesting little example of a connection between the incomplete digestive tract and more of a complete digestive tract. So that's why a lot of people like studying these organisms. Here is a mollusk, which also has a complete digestive tract. So this would be an oyster, clam. So all of these types of mollusks. So here they have, again, similar to cilia, these organs that continuously move to bring moisture, to bring water with food particles into the mouth. And then they have here in yellow is a very simple brain. So again, these brains are first associated with controlling the digestive tract. Now the food comes into a much more advanced digestive tract where we now have a true stomach and a true intestine. And then and exit with the anus. We're also going to get a lot more complicated structure here, where we have the beginnings of a circulatory system. This is an open circulatory system, beginnings of a respiratory system, the gills, together with advanced reproduction system with the gonads. So even in a very simple oyster or clam, we're already starting to get quite advanced in our processing of food and distribution. And we're also going to learn later on the semester about removal of waste, and the feridium is essentially their version of a kidney. So next time you look at an oyster, it's a much more complex organism than you might have otherwise suspected. But then we're going to talk quite a bit about the vertebrate digestive system in the next lecture. But here we have comparison of a human digestive system and a rabbit digestive system. And these are both called monogastric digestive systems. So humans and herbivores, for example, a rabbit, will have this type of digestive system, a true alimentary canal. And notice that we share the same structures. So the esophagus carries food from the mouth to the stomach. The stomach is going to process food in a very specific way and then pass it to the small intestine. Now, there's secondary organs of the liver and the gallbladder, liver and gallbladder, and also down below the pancreas, which sit right below the stomach, where the stomach enters into the small intestine and provide digestive enzymes and also bile for digestion of fats. So everything is pretty much identical between a human digestive tract and the rabbit's digestive tract, with the exception that you might note that the small intestine of the human, and compare that with the relative size of the small intestine of the rabbit has relatively more small intestine. And there's also where the small intestine joins with the large intestine. Notice that the large intestine in the human is relatively smaller than the large intestine of the rabbit. And we also have this other organ. In the rabbit, this organ called the cecum, C-E-C-U-M, it's pronounced like it's a S sound, so cecum, is a dead end tract, not unlike what you see in a gastrovascular cavity, because food that enters here will have to stop and then come back out. So this is almost like we have a gastrovascular cavity stuck onto an alimentary canal. Humans also have the remnants of a cecum, but it's not really functional in a human. Instead, it has been truncated to the point that we actually have just the remnants of it that we call the appendix, which generally does nothing more than cause problems. But that kind of begs the question of why exactly does the rabbit have such a long, small, and large intestine? And why does it have such this large cecum? And it has to do with the diet. Remember, humans are omnivores, meaning that we can consume both animal flesh and plant-based materials, but rabbits are purely herbivores and primarily eat grasses that have extremely high cellulose content, which is extremely difficult to digest. So that means more of the digestive tract needs to be devoted to digestion of these very fibrous plant-based materials. In fact, animals can't really digest cellulose, but bacteria can. So the secret of the cecum is that animals that eat a lot of cellulose actually have to have this special pocket here that's full of bacteria. And it's actually the bacteria that contain the enzymes that can break down the cellulose. And this, for a rabbit, they have another strategy that the cellulose will pass all the way through the small intestine. They extract as many nutrients as they can the first time through, and then they send the food to the cecum where it sits and essentially ferments for a while. It then gets sent out of the cecum and then goes through the large intestine so that it's removed as waste. But potentially there's still some more nutrition left in there. So a rabbit is what's called a cecotrope. So the contents of the cecum is removed from the body as soft feces. If you've ever raised rabbits or been around rabbits, you know that they will excrete this very soft, they form little balls of feces that they then reconsume. They eat it twice. They will re-ingest these soft fecal balls, bring it in the second time, but see, now it's already been pre-digested by bacteria, and now they can start really extracting the glucose from it. So a cecotrope takes advantage of two passes through the digestive tract. So that's one strategy that herbivores have to use in order to extract food from plant-based material. So this gives us some insight into the evolution of digestive systems. If we just generally compare a carnivore to an herbivore, so here's a wolf versus a koala bear. Koalas only eat these particular bamboo leaves that are very, very high in cellulose and are extremely difficult to digest, but it's their primary food source. And if you compare the digestive tracts, you will note that the koala devotes an enormous amount of area to the small and large intestines. But in addition to that, the wolf has a cecum very similar to ours where it's really not functional. Whereas the koala bear actually has the record for the longest cecum known in the animal kingdom, because this is where the primary digestion of the cellulose fibers is done. And much like what we see in the rabbit. Okay. And in their case, what they do is they actually will regurgitate this into the small intestine. And also they have this very large intestine, which will absorb some of the products of the cecum. So it kind of goes both ways. So, but the carnivore has a much simpler digestive system, reflecting the fact that animal flesh is relatively simple to digest. It's not difficult at all. Okay, so that's the end of our diversity talk on digestive system. Our next lecture, we're going to concentrate much more on the human digestive system and a few other vertebrates. All right, good day.